Welcome to week 4 of the LEC 2022 Summer Edition, live from Berlin, Germany. As you may have seen during the opener of the show, it's Star Guardian weekend, and we will close out the first half starting with a clash between two surprise teams, Excel and Astralis. I'm Laure, and I will be your host for the weekend. Trevor, Vedi, thank you so much for joining me this week. Vedi, you look amazing.
Thank
I love
you.
the pink.
You look great.
Thank you. Are you excited about the
Trevor,
weekend?
you're here. A little underdressed, it feels.
Yeah, actually, Trev, since you're here, I think it's the right time for me to hand over the magical interview wand.
The power of the LEC courses through my veins.
That was something.
Was that really necessary?
It's not about it being necessary. It's just about being fun and celebrating the
Is that the initiation to being an interviewer? You have to, like, ascend?
You know what? We'll just go with the flow because we're back after 1 week break in the LEC. And let's take a look at what happened in the season so far. Trouble, looking at the standings, Rogue, Fnatic, top 3, Excel, top 1. I think this one is a surprise.
I mean, it's the usual suspects, the Rogues, the Fnatics, Mad Lions, G2, and there is Excel, the team that just scraped by in spring to make playoffs. Now, of course, if you are watching this season, it's not so much of a surprise due to the performance that they've had so far. The Korean bootcamp seemed to have treated them pretty well. The fact that we talked to Young back in an interview and he was like, you know what, we're pretty sure of the style we want to play. We've got our picks ready, and that's also due to the Korean bootcamp. And so far, there's very few teams that seem to have any answers for the early game aggression.
They've been doing amazing, and it's a matter of knowing if they're going to be able to keep up with these performances. Very more on Fnatic and Rogue, maybe? Rogue.
Yeah, I think that when you look at their current position in the standings, expectations would be like, well, of course, this is where they're supposed to be, but that's not how they started off the split. If you are just joining us here in week 4, both Fnatic and Rogue did start off a little bit shaky. There were some question marks, in particular around their early game, but as we approach week 3, it feels like that they shored up a lot of their issues. Rogue find themselves on a 5-game winning streak right now. Fnatic convincingly defeated their rivals in G2, and both teams seem to be looking on form and primed and ready to get back into the action here in week 4.
Definitely looking stronger, but I don't think that's the case for the spring winners. Trouble, G2 started strong in summer here, even though they said that they didn't have much preparation coming back from MSI. But what happened during week 3?
I feel like
Fanning 2, Mad Lions, and then Fnatic.
Yeah, I mean, like they came straight back from a 0-2. We talked a little bit to Dylan. They were like, we're not sure about the meta, what picks we want to play, how we want our style to be in the early to mid. But also, I have to give it to them in the losses. I feel like versus Fnatic, Razork was on fire. He was a demon on the Rift. He was choking out Jankos from any potential gank. But when it comes to the Mad side of things, I felt like this was more we shut down Caps. You have no way back into the game. And this is a weakness G2 has really to work on, because every time Caps has been shut down from them, they've barely found a way back into this game.
It does just feel like that G2 are a team that are always going to have highs and lows during the regular season, and this is a team that, based on their current iteration, needs that time and prep in order to figure out what it is that they want to do and how they approach the game. And I think that their actual time in MSI really prepped them for the start of the split, but as teams got better, it seems that they started to figure G2 out. But now with a week break, an opportunity to reset, I'm expecting G2 to come back hard and fast as we get closer to that halfway point.
You mentioned MSI, and I think it's a really good point, because Trouble, they didn't have much time to prep and get ready for summer. How much did you think it impacted G2 coming into summer split?
I mean, you just have to look to last season, right? The Mad Lions winning spring, then going to MSI, then summer hits, and the regular split is absolutely atrocious. They were losing to teams they weren't supposed to lose, and that burnout sort of starts hitting you. I feel like it's the same thing with G2, even though now it's even worse, because due to the durability changes, the entire meta is changing, the entire style you want to play the game is changing, and until you figure this out without having the break, you got to put 5 times the work of other teams.
But I think a lot of credit needs to be given to G2, because remember that they found themselves at 4-1 heading into that last week, and I think that they were riding off the momentum that they had at MSI very well. So huge credit to them. Obviously, they did end up falling short 0-2 at the final hurdle, but we'll see what they look like as they bounce back here in week 4.
What would be G2 without some funny games or funny weeks, I want to say. But now we touched on the teams that had solid enough bases to keep the same roster from spring to summer. But let's talk about the other teams, that I want to touch on Mad Lions here, Vedi, because Niski is back and he's doing wonders for the team.
He certainly is. Many were surprised to not see him on the Rift last split in the LEC, but he did he joined the Mad Lions rather to provide this new iteration of the lineup, and my expectations were that they'd be a bit of a slow starter, but I think that they've looked incredibly good. Their early to mid game has looked fantastic. Their team fighting looks to be as good as it used to be in the past, and I feel like that while we have seen some poor decisions when it comes to their late game, I think that overall this team is an impressive one to watch. So this addition of Nisqy seems to be the most impactful roster change of the LEC.
And I really like what you said here about Mad Lions and their ability to teamfight Trouble, because this is what the Mad Lions used to look like. Maybe the meta favoring them also now, but also Nisqy helping a lot in communication and bridging Elioya into what he's the best at.
I feel like a few months ago I had a talk with Nisqy and he was talking to me about his time over in NA and how he was shot calling there as well, how he was making a lot of the calls for the team, right? And coming into the Mad Lions, you're expecting Nisqy to try and find this time to gel himself into the team. It feels like taking that leader role, breaking down the fight, A, B, C, D, start to finish, has really helped rookies, for example, like Unforgiven, to find their role in the team as well.
A few words maybe, Veli, on Astralis and also Vitality, who changed their jungler, bringing Haru in.
Well, I will say that I think that while they did make changes for Astralis, the roster, while showcasing improvement, still not quite enough yet from what we've seen to be able to break into the top 5. They are competing very closely with Vitality, as both of their rosters are still trying to figure out what gives them the necessary growth in order to be able to fight for the top spots. And with this 1 week break, maybe they've been able to fix some of their issues. We'll have to wait and see.
We'll have to wait and see, and they will have a big challenge this week facing some of the top dogs in the LEC, and other teams will also have a challenge because we will be playing on the B version of the pack 12.12, and Trouble wanted to run us through some picks. This is not picks to watch, guys. Trouble, the floor is yours.
All right, hello guys. I'm not gonna talk about Katarina, which was buffed in 12.12b, so if you wanna try her out, go ahead. I'm gonna talk about my first pick, which is Amumu, who, yes, was buffed in 12.12 initially. His bandage toss went from 70 mana down to 30, less than half on rank 1, plus he got a whooping of 50 flat damage added to his ultimate at level 6. Now, if you calculate that the average champion at level 6 has about 1000 HP, you can understand that 50 flat damage at fights like Rift Herald, where teams like to group up, is huge. Let's also not forget that due to all the neutral objective fighting in the early game, large area CC tools are extremely valuable. The champion synergizes really well with Kalista, as seen in the LPL, who likes early lane dominance. And since your bandage toss now costs less than half the mana it did before, it is way more spammable. Therefore, it gives Kalista lanes more opportunities for an early kill. Friendly reminder though, we might see the lethal wombo combo of Amumu Misfortune coming back into play that haunted us for previous seasons. Pick number 2, or as pros would like to say, the most broken champion currently on the patch, Seraphine. Even after slight nerfs to her stun duration through her E, week 3 of the LEC sees Seraphine with a 100% ban rate. But why? Seraphine has very strong wave clear and anti-dive tools. See her ultimate, empowered E, healing and shielding. And even though the early game used to be one of her weakest spots, durability pads solved this issue for her a long time ago. The champion thrives in extended fights due to her kit, which is what the meta is all about currently, and there is barely any other champions that can challenge the utility and the damage that Seraphine brings to a team. She's flexed between mid and bot, which allows draft flexibility and now hard scales on 2 items, Liandry's and Rylai's, rather than being a 4-item spiking heal bot that we remember from previous seasons. Now, one of my favorites, and a bunch of junglers that we have in the LEC, came back, which is Lee Sin. Now, due to the recent 12.12b clear speed jungle nerfs to Wukong, the Monkey King is stepping down, and a new, honestly kind of old, early game proactive jungler has risen back up to the top. Lee Sin received some AD and Q damage buffs a few patches ago, but it hasn't been until now that we see him on the Rift. With a lack of early game playmaking champions, Volibear, your turn is coming soon, Lee Sin has always returned in every meta to solve the issue. If you look at the mid lane pool currently, we have Swains, Lissandras and Aries as a prominent S tier picks, which all synergize so well and provide a lot of setup for Lee Sin ganks, but also insect kicks later on in the game. Now, of course, when a new challenger approaches the scene, there needs to be yet another one to counter it, as this is where Poppy comes in. LCK and LPL have almost been perma-banning Poppy when they want to play Lee Sin, because it's really difficult to make this insect plays with her W.
Talia is another one, especially over in the
Yeah.
LCK, that FLICKR, well, Rookie as well, has also been bringing out in the OPL as an answer to these highly mobile champions. So excited to see how the meta evolves, given that it is such, in theory, a small patch, but can have large implications.
Many things can happen, as we saw in other leagues so far. And I'm really glad we have Star Guardian Poppy here. She was one of the first ones to dress up. And as you saw, we are celebrating Star Guardian Week. And we've already asked you fans home on Twitter to create your ultimate Star Guardian roster. So let's have a look at the couple selections we had, starting with Star Guardians.
Brilliant. Of course.
The winner.
This is the
This
roster
is
that's
the
going to
winner.
save the
Then
world.
we haven't seen the rest.
I mean, it doesn't matter. Like, when the world is in peril, what do you need? 5 of these. That's what you need.
So you would clone yourself to save the world.
I mean, no, these are my cousins. I mean, you can see them all right here. Talias, Echoias, Akalias.
I want to
They're all
say
just-
that Vitality told that if you put this on broadcast, we might follow him on Twitter.
Nice one, Vitality. I see you. Great minds think alike.
All right, let's take a look at the next one. What do we have? Okay.
Okay, I mean, there's
There's
5
no-
Venuses
yeah.
and there's 5 Yankoses, you know? And all I'm going to say is
I don't
my
ex-
hit rate would probably be higher.
I think
you
we're
know?
doomed.
This
with
would be
one.
very chaotic because every single Yankos that I'm seeing right now would invade on their own, but would blame the other Yankos, which then would blame the other Yankos,
True.
which then would blame the other Yankos.
Of course.
And this creates a circle that would never
Can
break.
you
just
just
saying-
imagine how loud this roster would be?
Oh, wow. You
Honestly.
would know they were
No, no,
coming.
no.
Surprise attacks would not
Don't
be a
invite
thing.
them to the studio.
There's also like so many skill shots here.
All right, last one, please. Let's take a look. Of course. Star Guardian Draven. This is scary, honestly. I think it's the mustache.
I think this is
scared me.
cursed.
This is super cursed. Of course,
I mean,
yeah.
they would arrive in style. They would they save you? Debatable.
No, they would probably FF 10 if they died 2 times in lane.
Yeah.
I don't know,
Something
it's-
would change. That's what we can
yeah.
guarantee.
It's just Draven. They would just end up
But
killing each other
Draven
or
needs a
fighting
Star
each
Guardian
other.
skin. That's what I've decided. He needs a
Gragas
skin.
as well.
Moving on and going back to the LEC, of course, because this is what we're focused on, from the best fantasy lineups to the actual top dogs. In the LEC, tomorrow Fnatic and Team Vitality will clash for a spot on top of the standings in our G Ultra Gear match of the week. Let's take a look at it.
I think it's impossible not to have an ego in League of Legends because you have to believe in yourself. There will always be circumstances where you need to know that you are better and you need to trust. And when the risk comes through, you need to trust in your abilities that you're going to do better, because players who don't believe that they can do better, believe that they will just perform worse, are bad players.
This might sound a little bit crazy, but I've never really played against anyone where I thought like, wow, this guy's like way better than me. And I played basically versus all the players in the world. I can see somebody's better on the champion than me, but I don't really feel like I played with someone and he was just so much better than me and just completely stomped me and I couldn't do anything.
Back once again. Abadage still doing work. It was Upset just cleaning up the fight. Somehow got the triple. Somehow got the penta.
Upset's a bit of a heartbreaker because to me, he's a guy that has been so good. He never dies. He puts up good damage numbers. He has great CS numbers. Like, these are all things that you want in an AD carry, and yet it's not enough to win. And it's not a situation where he's playing too safe or maybe not taking enough risks, or at least that's not how it looks from the outside. It just feels like there's something missing there that is holding him back from achieving those greater heights.
There's none of it for Vitality. There's none of it for Perks.
Vitality coming into this year definitely had an ego. The expectations were completely overblown. I think right now, and our new mentality is like, oh, we are a top 5 team. Let's try to get top 1, right? And every time I've thought like this in the past as well, I had pretty good success. I'm still looking to find that success together with my team, right? Which is the saddest part, because I feel like I'm just struggling so much when I don't know actually why it's so hard, right? We're not the best team in Europe. We want to be. I don't think we are far away. What matters in the end is like who takes the title, right?
I think when you look at both these teams, ultimately they're both chasing a trophy. But right now, Vitality are the ones that are lagging behind. And while Fnatic try to find their way into the top 3, Vitality need to find their way into the top 5, the top 4. Fnatic should be the favorites here. Fnatic is the safer bet, but it still does not feel like a sure thing.
triple for Twitch.
You can also see it as a positive thing that people expect him to win or be like top 2 or whatever. You can also see it from the positive side. It's like people really expect me to do so well. That must mean they think that I should be that good.
Wow, a lot of strong takes, I feel, from this Match of the Week video. And I think this is fair. When Perk said the team had a lot of ego, we had to readjust, this is fair given the expectations that were on Vitality's roster at the end of the beginning of the year, rather. And I feel like it was the same for Fnatic. We expected them to see them in the finals in spring. It didn't happen. Maybe disappointing start of the season for them. But they readjusted in summer, Vedi.
For sure. I think that when we look back at spring, the results coming into the start of the split would be that these teams would be fighting for the finals. And if not both of them in the finals, then they would be contenders. One of them would be. And the fact that neither of them were in the finals, the fact that Vitality was eliminated very early on in playoffs and Fnatic fell short to G2 of all teams was an expectation, a result that we did not really expect to see. And I think that coming into this split, they've both, well, I think Vitality have very rightly readjusted their expectations and they're kind of taking things one step at a time. But I think that right now, the scrutiny is still upon them, and they need to prove that they can compete with the best because they're yet to take down any of the top 5 that we have in our league.
What's on the side of Fnatic trouble? Because I remember most of the players, especially Upset during an interview, saying that coming off spring, they realized that they needed to find themselves as a team. The core was missing. Do you think it's on motion now for them?
I feel like we have to bring the bad news first and the good news after. The bad news are Fnatic have not won anything since 2018. Which is a very long time ago. If my maths don't fail me, that's 4 years ago. But the good news are you see how the roster's coming in with very big expectations from themselves, and they're actually showing it on the Rift. They're doing pretty well right now. Upset said, no one has really challenged me yet. We're talking about the best bot in the West that we've been singing their praises for so long. And then you have Wonder suddenly coming into this roster. And I feel like especially, oh my God, his Gragas performances, like this guy has his niche peak. That niche pick is Gragas, but the fact that you can trust this guy to give him the pick that he wants, and then he will take control of lane, he will take control of the top side of the map, he will spike on that one item on the champion, and then he will provide you with engages, disengages. I think he had something like 800 damage per minute on the Gragas, which is absolutely absurd.
I think that when we think about these two matching up, there is quite a significant stylistic difference, given that Fnatic is a very aggressive early game focused team. And typically Fnatic has always been known as this bot side focused team, but they're investing resources top. And you have a look at some of the stats. We talk about jungle proximity a lot, and that basically just means the amount of time that the jungler is spending around your lane. You can see that it is double for Wonder compared to Alphari. Wonder gets a lot of resources thrown his way. He is put in a position to try and carry, and he does well with those resources. But credit to Alphari, he continues to be that reliable laner, that standout of someone that you can expect to put up a good performance. But does that mean that he and Vitality can always translate that into wins? That right now is the big question for Vitality.
Yeah, and of course, a matchup to keep an eye on for tomorrow. But let's bring up today's schedule and see what we can expect in those 5 games of the evening, starting with Misfits Fnatic in Game 3, Vitality Rogue in Game 5. 4 teams that have upwards trajectories, Vedi.
For sure, it's going to be an uphill battle for many teams that are facing off today, but I'm just super excited to see what these teams have come up with a week off, right? Because some teams took breaks, some teams continue to practice, but I think that whenever you give a period of time for players to reset and reevaluate what the meta looks like, they'll always come in with fresh ideas, new picks, new things practiced. And I think that this week, or this day even, could be the day where a lot of shakeups and expectations are already shattered compared to what we had before.
And what Vedi said is so important, because coming into the durability patch, a lot of the teams didn't exactly know how they wanted to play the game, how the game has particularly changed. Are Tar dives diable? Are they not? Do you want to scale? Do you want to play a proactive early game? And I think having that 1 week off when you've seen a lot of the teams already play might change up a few playstyles.
Yeah, and we'll see how all this team can perform. But talking about the first match today, we will have XL facing off against Astralis. And after reaching their very first ever playoffs in spring, the team is now aiming for a higher summer. Let's put the spotlight on the surprise team this season.
I felt bad for replacing Adrian in the first place, because back when I was in G2 and he just joined the LEC, he was talking to me a lot, like during the client, about like matchups and stuff like this, and he was just like, after the game that they played against us, he tweeted me, and he seemed like, you know, a really nice guy, so I enjoyed talking to him, and also felt worse because he wasn't even playing like bad or anything during the first 2 weeks, so I hope he gets another chance at least. I think without me they would make playoffs already, like last split, just because I think their players are good enough. I think that's one of the reasons why I joined the team and why I think we did well, because I already knew beforehand that the players were good enough. I pride myself with that. I think I have a good scouting eye. I could be a talent scouter at some point, and what I could have brought as well to the team that was maybe better than Advin was probably like laning phase. I feel like me and Patrick right now are probably one of the best. I think we're kind of like stomping everyone.
It has taken 1,142 days, and on the 7th time of trying, XL will make playoffs.
I think it was nice, change of pace, I guess, that you don't have any expectations to win. Of course, you have expectations of yourself, but even you don't expect to win like every single game that you play. Some games you're just like, yeah, I mean, you'll be playing against G2 today or something. It could be a very hard one. So I guess it's different in that regard. It doesn't feel like really, really bad if you lose to like, in theory, worse team than you. Well, it still does, but like not as bad as when you were in G2. It kind of reminds me of the Splice days when I just joined and I was like enjoying every day. You know, go on stage, you never know what was gonna happen. If you win 2-0, really good. If you lose 0-2, sucks, we'll get it next time, you know.
With the Winter's Bite, locked in place, has used the cleanse, will flash the wall, but the chase is on, face call, a double. Finn with the barrel takes Hillisang's head.
After Spring Split, we talked about that if we don't make it to MSI, we should go to Korea to bootcamp anyway, because it's just very useful. And I said basically that if we actually want to make Worlds, we have to go to Korea, otherwise probably not making it.
It was started by the players, and the organization immediately backed it and said, okay, if this is what you guys need and want, we will make it happen. Going into Korea, we had the goal to play way more for our bot lane. And secondly, the Korean teams, the solo queue meta, the Chinese teams, they really force an early game meta, because if you don't draft for early game, they will end the game very quickly against you, so we couldn't get away with scaling.
Nelson was like the big part of why we actually got scrims with the good teams. He can like talk to all the coaches from LPL, and he knows a lot of them, so they were actually down to scrim us. I think otherwise it would be hard to number 1, number 2 LPL team to scrim number 6 EU team that came to Korea for fun.
Thanks to Nelson, we got a lot of like tryout scrims, and teams would like try if we were like good enough to scrim against them, and we would give everything to prove ourselves that we were good enough, and most of the times we ended up successfully doing so and then getting more scrims against the top teams. Almost every scrim game was like a stage game, so everyone gave 100%, 6 to 9 games a day. We got so much experience against good teams because we wanted to prove ourselves against these teams and show them that we can hang with them.
This is Newdog now looks for the TP, he's in. A great Gnar pulls them back. Newdog looks for the backline, and Kazi is assassinated by the Duck. Parks has no stopwatch to stop his death either. Vitality get demolished. XL are not willing to lose today.
Sometimes I still, you could say like I choke it a bit, like in the laning phase, like I don't know. I don't live up to my expectations, I guess. Other than that, I think we're doing fine for now. But I think we are much better than what we showed on stage so far.
I personally feel a lot of pressure to perform very well with this roster, especially now that the expectation is so high. That's partly because having been with XL for 2.5 years now, it feels like if we're going to Worlds, this is the moment. It's like the one and only moment we've been waiting for so long. And if we don't grab it now, it might never happen again.
What an emotional and super inspiring video piece, I want to say, Trouble, because when you think of the XL roster, the mix is so diverse. You have Finn coming back from NA, Newdog, who's still looking for the top in the LEC, Mickey, who lived through the golden age of the LEC back in 2019, and then rookie Markun to just around everything. I love this roster and what it's shaping to be now.
I don't know, the video was kind of emotional, starting with Mickey talking about Advin as well, because it's like, the guy wasn't even playing bad. But I have a good scouting eye. I really wanted to play with that team. Someone had to step down. That was Advin. Mickey takes the reins, and they actually make playoffs. Now, at the start of the season, we had Finn over in the NOC, and he talked to us a little bit about the bootcamp. He couldn't tell us particular details on who they screamed, but he was like, we screamed MSI teams. We screamed teams that play with the MSI teams in their leagues, talking LCK, LPL and stuff like this, like really top teams. And we were beating them. And a lot of the games where we wouldn't, we added so much valuable knowledge to our book that when we can use this in the LEC, and it shows to be working.
And it reminds me of what Markun said when we invited him on the desk a couple of weeks back about how he learned about the jungle, especially in the early game. And what's interesting here, Freddy, in this first game is that you have the two best statistically jungler in the early game.
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest takeaways I think that XL learned, and Youngbuck talked a little bit about it in that video, was how their early game approach shifted so dramatically. And like we often see it in their draft approaches, and you see it in Markoon's playstyle. Even when he first joined the league, I remember his volley bear diving underneath a tower like at level 3. He was someone that was always instigating and looking for plays. And I think that that's now been translated to the whole team. The whole team understands better how to play around him, how to enable him, and in turn he responds by giving them ganks, setting them up for success, and ultimately giving XL a super dominant early game. And on the other side, we see a very similar approach from Astralis. They can't always translate it in the same way, but the way in which Xerxes pairs up with his support in Jonghoon, we see that same level of aggression where a lot of the early game facilitation stems from that jungle support duo.
And I feel like this is also double-edged sword, right? Because for Astralis, I feel like the jungle is so pivotal for them to make plays in the early game that when, for example, we saw Astralis on something like the Belveth for Xerxes, and he didn't have the priority lanes, he couldn't farm till that late game spike, it became a little bit difficult for them to pivot the game, and they ended up losing. Now, when you have Xerxes on something like also the volleyball or early game proactive jungler, and he can make these plays, he can get his bot ahead, he can get his solo lanes ahead, this is how Astralis seems to be functioning their best so far.
And I do think that when we look at these two teams, they are stylistically quite similar in terms of how they like to draft and how they approach, and how this jungle support synergy is super important in terms of being able to accrue early game leads. And when you look at Astralis' games, they actually get a lot of early kills, right? They will fight you, they will contest you, and even in this game against Vitality, they were sitting at like 4 kills to 1 pre-10 minutes. Like, it was crazy how bloodthirsty this team is. The problem is their ability to translate those kills and early game leads into actual map control. They don't always convert it into towers, they don't always convert it into objectives, and that is something that XL is incredibly good at, which is really what separates the two and why XL find themselves at the top of the standings.
Yeah,
right
I think
now.
it's fair to say that XL is favored here, of course, but focusing on where Astralis should trigger them, maybe we can focus on draft, and especially one draft, Vidi, because when XL draft for late game and it doesn't go well in the early game for them, this is when things fall down.
For sure, and I think that it's important to remember that there was a window where XL did find a way back into this game, but the early looked very different, right? When we look at this draft from XL, they don't have the same pushing lanes that they typically get. They're being pushed in by the Gangplank in top. They're being pushed in by the Azir in mid. Also, you have Rogue with a hyper-aggressive early game jungler, and basically they're leveraging their prior lanes to limit the options that XL have in the early game. And that's crucial because when you take those options away from Markoon, he then becomes more hamstrung, and XL's overall early game agency becomes a lot more limited.
Also, if you look over at Spring XL versus Summer XL, you see that Nuktak was stuck in his lane a lot over in Spring, and he wasn't really getting any pressure on the side lanes. This summer, it's Nuktak instantly pushing in a wave and going either top or bot. Now, with this particular draft, your only play is jungle mid. You cannot necessarily dive towards the top side of the map. You cannot necessarily dive towards the bot side of the map. And when that mid lane is also shut down, it gives you no window of early game play.
Now, of course, this isn't an easy thing to do because when we do use this as an example, we are talking in the context of Rogue, which are some of the best laners that we do have in our league. So even if you do have matchups that give you the ability to get that early push, being able to then leverage that is another beast entirely. But the best shot I would imagine that Astralis have of being able to upset and take down XL is by attacking them in the draft. Find ways in which you can draft yourself winning lanes. And if all else fails, just scale for team fights. Because I think that Astralis, if there's nothing else, they can still pick Ornn and they can still look to try and 5v5. But it's this early game that is the scariest part from the side of XL.
Okay, not everyone can do the Misfits thing, Venues, come on. Not everyone can go down 10k gold.
I mean, if nothing else, just scale. Just Ornn, let's go. Team fight. Okay.
We'll see, maybe Astralis can create a surprise here against XL. And it's time for us to send over to Kajol and Dracos for Astralis versus XL. Take it away, guys.